Tonight, Trump signed the emergency coronavirus aid bill just hours after it was passed by the Senate. This legislation provides free coronavirus testing if you can find it. It ensures paid emergency leave as well as additional Medicaid funding and unemployment benefits.
Senate Republicans wasted the weekend and the first work days of this week with delaying tactics that forced Americans to wait until tonight for the United States Senate to finally pass the Coronavirus Response Act, which was passed by the House of Representatives last week.
Senate Republicans are now working on a $1 trillion spending proposal that the White House said would include $500 billion in direct payments to Americans.
The price tag we're seeing now for this potential stimulus, you think back about a decade, the Obama stimulus, you think back to TARP that came before that, we're looking at something potentially even bigger in scope than that.
And it might not be nearly enough. We just don't know. Something we have to remember that's different between the 2008 crisis and now, the 2008 crisis was self-inflicted. The banking industry did it to itself, taking enormous risk with the House's money, and then essentially the House fell apart. Right now, what we're faced with is essentially a natural disaster that our government didn't assess or address. And now the only way to address this crisis is basically shut down the economy nationally, if not globally. And the implications of it are huge across all industries.
What we're talking about now is what economists call counter-cyclical spending, or spending in order to meet the shock, this negative economic shock that is caused by the economic impact of the virus. That kind of deficit spending is not just legitimate, but it's essential. Now, what makes life difficult sometimes when you're in this kind of fiscal condition is if you've already spent your sort of fiscal outlet with wasteful tax cuts. But the point is that the Treasury markets, the borrowing markets, are saying to the government, you have all the fiscal space you need to do what it takes. So we should not hesitate at all. Remember, what messes up your fiscal accounts in the long term is not temporary measures to offset a recession, it's permanent tax cuts.
The economy's crash continues unabated with another 1,300-point loss in the Dow today, even as the federal government unveiled new proposals for big stimulus spending to try to shore things up.
The Dow dropped below 20,000 points for the first time since February 2017. It has now wiped out all of the gains made during the Trump presidency.
Any bailout that Democrats will support has to put the workers first. We're not going to bail out an industry and then have them cut workers, cut their salaries, and all kinds of things like that. This is for the workers above all. Second, we're going to have to put some brakes on some of these executives. The airlines industry itself did about $300 billion in stock buybacks over the last year. Money that didn't go into the company, didn't go into the workers, was simply sent out to the shareholders to raise the stock prices. That is outrageous, and we're going to have to somehow figure out how to make up for that, because the airline shouldn't be allowed to do that in the past or in the future.
But if you lose your job for 12 weeks or 16 weeks, that's not going to help you. You need this robust, new, bold unemployment or employment benefits. You know, remember, all the gig workers, all the self-employed workers, they don't get these benefits. And the average worker who does gets 30 to 50% of their wages replaced, often just $300 or $400. If we want to do something to really help, and the workers who are now in a great worker recession, let's be clear, they're in a great worker recession. If we want to help them, nothing's going to help as much about making sure all workers are covered, and that instead of getting replaced 30 or 50%, they get full replacement for at least a good while of their wages so they can put food on the table, pay their rent, keep the lights on in their own homes.
We occasionally have these great crises, and when they occur, we're able to rise above our normal partisanship and many times our normal positions, because these are not ordinary times. This is not an ordinary situation, and so it requires extraordinary measures.
Extraordinary times meet extraordinary measures. Details are still being hammered out, but the ideas for a new stimulus include 2 rounds of checks, sent directly to individual Americans, loans to small businesses, $50 billion just for the airline industry, more than $1 trillion total. Are there right and wrong ways to do this sort of thing? What more will need to be done if this is done? Will this stimulus of this amount be enough to stave off what is being described as an imminent economic collapse?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.